Today on V-Strom Garage, I'm going to show you how I change my fork oil and some of the various tools that you'll need to complete the job. First of all, you're going to need just some basic sockets, 8, 10, 12, 14, and 17 millimeter sockets. Of course, the socket wrench. You're going to need a 24 millimeter wrench for the fork cap. You're going to need a flat blade screwdriver for the rebound on top of the fork cap. You're going to, of course, need fork oil. You're going to need a 19 millimeter Allen socket for the front axle. You're going to need a 4 millimeter Allen for your front fender. And that's about all the tools you're going to need to complete this job. After you got the front end of your bike jacked up and the front wheel off the ground, one of the first things I like to do is go ahead and loosen the pinch bolt on the top triple tree, and go ahead and we'll crack these fork caps. So we'll loosen those up before we do anything else, because if you take all the forks off and you don't do that first, trying to get that cap off is kind of a pain in the butt. So we'll go ahead and we'll just crack those loose before we pull those out. Okay, so we got our 10 millimeter socket on a ratchet. We'll loosen up this pinch bolt. Alright, so that's loosened up enough. Now we'll go ahead and we'll take our 24 millimeter wrench. If you want to try to use a socket on this, you're going to have to pull your handlebars off, so if you got a wrench, it works best. So we're just going to crack this loose. Alright. That's it. Just crack loose. These things don't have to be super tight when you put these back on. There is a torque spec for it, but if they're just on there snug, once you torque your pinch bolt back down, that cap isn't coming off. One other thing I didn't mention is to go ahead and back your preload off from your top here. So I'll do that next before I get any further. Alright, so our fork cap's already loosened, so the next thing I like to do is go ahead and take our brake calipers off. And do this while the tire is on the ground. Don't do it jacked up. Same thing with the front axle. So when I take calipers off, if you just take and just gently twist it, it pushes the piston in just a little bit. It makes it easier to get back on later. So we're going to go ahead and do that on both sides. Alright, so next thing we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and loosen up the front axle pinch bolts. Leave a 10 millimeter. When you do these, just break them loose just a little bit at a time. Just kind of alternate back and forth until they're both loose. Alright, so the next thing we'll do is go ahead and break this axle loose. Again, make sure the wheel's on the ground. Okay, our axle is loose. Now we can go ahead and jack this thing up, and we'll take the axle out and get the front wheel out of there. Alright, so next we'll go ahead and we'll get this axle out of the front wheel, since the wheel is off the ground, we can go ahead and pull it. Alright, our front wheel's rounded out, pull the wheel out. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this 8mm bolt off from the brake line here. And when I'm doing this, I'm just going to do one fork tube at a time. I don't have to totally take the fender off. There is a flat little nut that goes up in the fender back here that goes through it that this bolt goes on to, so that will drop. Do that, and then our 4mm Allen bolt here. Okay. Now, all we have to do is go ahead and the two pinch bolts that's up on the lower triple tree up in here, we'll loosen that up and the whole fork tube will slide down. Okay, so let's loosen up these two bolts up here. I'm not sure how good you're going to see it, but there's two bolts on the side of this lower triple tree. So same thing with the two pinch bolts on the fork. We're just going to break them both loose and just alternate back and forth. Make them come out evenly. Till they're both hand loose. Not a lot of room to work with in there, but and you can see our fork tube's already falling out here. Okay, now we can just go ahead and slide this fork tube out. Okay, fork tube's out. Now what we're going to do, we're going to clean all this up before we get any further. Alright, so we got our fork cleaned up. And when you start cleaning these things, check for, you know, like all the dead bugs and stuff. Make sure you get all that stuff off. Look for little rock nicks. Sometimes you'll get a little nick in your thing from a rock. If you can feel it with your fingernail, if it hits the oil seal, you're going to end up ripping it. So the way I've always done it, I get some real fine emery cloth and don't press very hard, but if you just lightly go up and down real lightly just to take that edge off from there, that way it won't rip your oil seal. But be very light on the sandpaper because you don't want to scratch that surface up either. So just a little tip. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and take our pre-loosened cap off. I went ahead and got a 24mm socket for this part. It's a little bit quicker than the wrench. Now this thing's got under spring, so it will pop up. Or not. Okay. So next thing we're going to be doing is there's a little nut down here that we got to break this cap loose with. So we'll do that next. Then we'll be able to take off our spacer, the washer, the spring, take that out and go ahead and drain this. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and take this fork cap off here with a dampening rod. So what I got here is two 14mm wrenches, and it's not on there too strong. Just pop that loose like that, then you can pop this whole cap off. There's a specific measurement for this nut, how far this has to go down. I believe it's 10.5mm. So we'll see if we can see that once we get it off. Okay, I don't know if you can see that, but from this nut to the top here needs to be 10.5mm when you put this back on. Now they make a little tool that threads onto here to be able to prime the cartridge. I don't have that right now, so we're going to have to improvise on that. So from this point, we can take off our little washer here. We'll place all this stuff in order. You can see the damper rod slides down. So with that, we got our spacer, there's a washer, and of course our spring. And from there we can go ahead and dump our oil out. So just slowly pump this. So we're probably not going to get all this oil out of here. So we'll go ahead and let that thing drain a little bit. I'll find something to kind of prop it up, let it drain. So after you kind of let that sit a little bit and drain, you're going to want to grab your damper tube here. And you're going to get all the oil out of there also. When you don't feel any more pressure on this thing, you probably got all the oil out of it. Alright, so after all that drains out, since I'm only flushing these things, I'll put a little bit of new fluid in there and kind of rinse them out, and then we'll go ahead and put the oil up to the correct level and then reassemble. Okay, we're going to go ahead and dump a couple ounces of the new fork oil in here. We're going to work that a little bit just to get all the old stuff out of there. Again, reach in and grab our damper tube. We can work that a little bit too. That'll get all the old stuff out of there. This is the first time I've had these forks apart. Not sure if the guy I bought it from, if that was ATF fluid that he had in there, or because it didn't smell like fork oil, because fork oil usually stinks. But there is some people that swear on using the ATF fluid for fork fluid, which I guess technically would work, but it's not that much more expensive to get fork oil. Alright, so we'll let that sit and drain a little bit. Okay, so we've let this drain for a while. Now we're going to go ahead and pour in our new fork oil. It calls for the 05 1000, it's calling for 505 milliliters, which on the ratio right cup, it doesn't have milliliters, it has cc's, which cc's is the same as milliliters. So I filled it up approximate. So we're going to go ahead and pour this in. Okay. Alright, so after we fill that up, what we're going to do is we're going to slowly start getting all that oil in there. Then we're going to do the same with the dampening rod. Like I said before, there's a tool to screw onto that dampening rod to pull it out of there. I don't have one. Normally you don't use that like on upside down forks. But these just happen to be cartridge type forks. So the way around that is get a magnet. Grab your dampening rod, you're going to do the same thing. We want to get all that oil into that cartridge, and it'll start getting harder. So you want to do this before you check your level of the oil. Alright, so that's feeling pretty good. Alright, so that's going to fall back down, so we'll have to use our magnet again after we check the level. Alright, so next thing is to use our tool here. I already have this preset. It's supposed to be at 133 millimeters from the top. So I got this preset. There's tiny little numbers on here. They're real hard to read, but I cheated and got my vernier calipers and measured it out. So we're going to set that just like that. And we'll see, you can see the fluid coming up. That's pretty thick, so you gotta kind of take your time with it. And you'll know when you get to that point, you'll hear it start sucking air. There you go. So we'll go ahead and pull this out. And since this is pretty clean oil, we can go ahead and just put it back in our eraser cup. I'll drop that first. Yeah, we can use this oil to rinse out the next tube. Anyways, alright, we'll just let that sit for a minute. Okay, so now our fork level is set. There's other ways to do it. You can actually measure down, you know, you can kind of eyeball it. I think the measurement on that is 5.24 inches from the top to the bottom of the oil. Okay. Alright, so next thing we can do is go ahead and get this damping rod up. And we'll double check that it's 10.5 millimeters from that nut. Again, it's easier if you got the little threaded rod to go on there, but this magnet will work, but now that it's tighter, you just got to go a lot slower. Then you just grab it by hand. Okay, so wipe this oil off a little bit. I'm going to use my veneer calipers just because I have them, but yeah, you can use tape measure or whatever you want to use. Hopefully I got this in the frame here. Let's grab some more. Alright, so we're about 10.5 right there. So we can go ahead and put our spring back in. I believe there's a little tapered side on one side, so you want the smaller end to go down. Again, the damper rod's probably going to fall down again, so we'll use our magnet. Okay. Alright, so next our washer goes on. Our spacer. Oop. Gotta be quicker, I guess. Then we can get our little washer on the top here, and that'll hold the damper rod up. Just like that. Okay. I'm going to double check our nut one more time. Okay. A little turn on that. Okay. Alright, now we can go ahead and put our cap back on. So we're just going to do this till it just touches that nut. Okay. Then we'll just get our two 14mm wrenches and we'll tighten that up. Like that. All right. Then we'll bring this up and we'll get that started. These are real fine threads on there, so you just got to be patient with it. Alright, so that's just snug down there. We'll give her just a little extra snug once we get it back into the bike. But that is finished. Now it's just a matter of doing the reverse thing and putting them back in, and then we'll do the next one. Okay, so we got our second fork leg done. So we'll go ahead and reinstall this one. So once we get that up there, we're going to set that screw in there just to hold it up so the fork tube doesn't fall out. We can also put the Allen screw back in there. Leave it loose, but just put it in there so it doesn't, the fork tube doesn't slide down. Okay, so next thing we want to do, we want to get our fork so it's the same height on the top triple tree as the first one. And then we're going to snug that 10mm bolt up. And we'll keep that from sliding down. Hold that by hand. And just get it a little snug. And that'll hold that cap in place. We're going to snug this up first down here, then I'm going to loosen that back up, and then I'll snug the top cap. But it's just easier to get to that one to get the height set. So the next thing we do, we'll go ahead, the two 10mm bolts on the lower triple tree, we're going to go ahead and tighten those. We'll torque them down too. Those get torqued down to 16.5 foot-pounds. You can do it by hand if you're good at it, but just make sure you're going alternating back and forth, because if you don't, one will get tight and the other one will loosen up. So it's important to get those the same. Actually, this is going to be a little bit easier to use a smaller ratchet to get it started. I'll get them snug with these and then I'll finish with the torque. Make sure you don't use a 1/2 inch torque wrench on stuff like this. So these smaller bolts, you really want to get an inch-pound torque wrench. This one is foot-pounds, but it's pretty high quality snap-on, so it can go down fairly low. But normally I'd use a smaller inch-pound, even a 1/4 inch torque wrench. So again, keep alternating as that thing clicks. Go to the next one, back up. Okay. So that's good. Now I'm going to loosen the top one again, and then I'm going to snug up the fork cap. Not a lot of room in there. So once you got that loose, you can grab your 24mm wrench and give that fork cap just a good snug. Alright, so we'll get it kind of snug with this, and then we'll go ahead and torque it down. Your torque wrench, again, 16.5 foot-pounds. Always double check with your service manual. So now all we have to do is go ahead and put our bolt in here. Again, there's a little square washer that goes on the inside of the fender. There's like a little plastic groove inside of there that it just slides up into. Okay. Again, you're screwing it into plastic so you don't over tighten it and break your fender. It's got to be snug. Same with this one. That's good to go. Now we can go ahead and install our front wheel and get this baby rolling. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and put the front wheel back on. Put our spacer in. Spacer out. I just put a little bit of grease on those things just to kind of hold them in there. Still gotta be a little careful. Alright, so that front axle's on. It's good. I guess we can go ahead and torque that axle down. So I believe this one is 72.5 foot-pounds. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and drop this jack down. Now we can finish torquing. Okay. Alright, next we'll go ahead and put our brake calipers on. And those are getting torqued down to 28 foot-pounds. Alright. Okay, we'll go ahead and do the other side. Alright, so both the brake calipers are on and torqued. Now the last thing we have to do is torque the front axle pitch bolts. And I believe those are at 16.5 foot-pounds. Again, there's two of them, so you need to alternate back and forth. Okay. One more thing. After you do all that, make sure you pump up your front brakes. Otherwise you'll take it off the lift or whatever you got it on, you're not going to have any brake. So make sure you pump that up.